paradrama tales. I walked through the door, broken, exhausted, barely able to stand. After hours alone in pain, all I wanted was a little care. Instead, I found my husband in the kitchen, eating as if nothing had happened. It was just another ordinary day. I wasn't doing anything dangerous, just walking down a set of stairs outside, thinking about all the little tasks ahead of Meg: groceries, laundry, getting dinner ready for the kids. My mind was 1,000 miles away when it happened. One wrong step, one slick patch, one slip. Before I even had time to react, my body crashed down the stairs. The impact was immediate and blinding. Pain shot up my spine like a lightning bolt, stealing the air from my lungs. For a few horrifying seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't even cry out. I lay there, stunned and gasping, trying to make sense of what had just happened. When I finally managed to get up, the pain was excruciating. Not the kind you shake off or push through, but the deep, throbbing, consuming kind that tells you something is seriously wrong. Somehow, I made it back inside the house, every step agony, every breath a battle. My husband saw me, saw my twisted expression, my trembling hands, and, to his credit, he reacted quickly at first. He bundled the kids into the car and rushed me to the emergency room. I remember sitting in the passenger seat, clutching my side, biting my lip to keep from crying out every time we hit a bump. The world outside the window blurred into nothingness. All I could focus on was the raw, screaming pain radiating from my back. When we arrived at the hospital, I made a decision that, in hindsight, I wish I could take back. I told him to leave, not because I didn't need him, not because I didn't want him there, but because the kids were tired and scared and confused. Because I thought he would be better off taking them home, getting them settled, and coming back for me when I was admitted or given a plan. I thought foolishly that he would check in, that he would call, that he would ask if I needed anything. I thought that even if he wasn't physically next to me, he would still be there for me. I sat there alone in the emergency room for 8 long hours. No food, no comforting voice, no one to hold my hand when they took blood, or to squeeze my shoulder when the pain became unbearable. Just me, alone, waiting. The doctors eventually confirmed what my body already knew: a sacrum fracture, a break in the bone that connects the spine to the pelvis. A serious injury, one that would require weeks, if not months, of careful healing. I texted him the news expecting something, a call, a message, some word of concern or support. But there was nothing. Finally, at 8 p.m., my mother-in-law arrived to pick me up. She was kind, brisk, worried in the way only a mother can be. She didn't need to be told what to do. She immediately suggested a heat pack, insisted on getting my prescriptions filled, and hovered around me like a protective shield. In contrast, my husband's absence, not just physical, but emotional, felt even more glaring. I had fallen, I had broken, and the one person I should have been able to lean on had already, quietly, stepped away. The emergency room is a strange place to be alone. The lighting is too bright, but somehow everything still feels shadowed, like the world shrank down to a few sterile chairs. The occasional beep of a heart monitor, the low murmur of nurses behind the counter. Time stretches unnaturally in those rooms, each minute feeling like an hour. And there I was, broken, sitting slumped in a chair because it hurt too much to lie down, too much to sit upright, just waiting. At first, I distracted myself by scrolling through my phone, sending my husband the occasional text, short factual update: still waiting on X-ray results. They think it might be serious, in a lot of pain. He didn't respond much. When he did, it was practical. Updates about the kids, logistical things. No. You okay? No. Hang in there. I'm thinking of you. Not even a, do you need me to come back? The longer I sat there, the more I noticed what was missing. Everyone else seemed to have someone: a mother, a brother, a friend sitting close, nodding along as they spoke, handing over tissues when emotions leaked out. I had no one. Just the increasingly sharp, gnawing pain in my lower back and the heavy silence. I watched people come and go. A teenager with a broken wrist, a woman doubled over from a kidney infection, an elderly man who could barely shuffle forward without help. Every time the automatic doors hissed open, a little part of me hoped it might be him, that he had come back anyway, realizing that even if I said go, what I really needed was someone to stay. But it never was. By hour 3, the pain had become a living thing. By hour 5, I couldn't tell if the tears stinging my eyes were from the fracture or the loneliness. By hour 7, I stopped checking my phone. I realized that no one was coming. The doctor finally came over close to 8 p.m. with a stack of papers and a grim expression. Sacrum fracture. No surgery for now, but serious restrictions. No lifting, no bending, no strenuous activity, and a stern warning: take healing seriously or risk permanent damage. They handed me a prescription for painkillers, a cheap pamphlet about spinal fractures, and sent me on my way. No wheelchair, no escort. Just a bag of instructions I could barely carry and a hollow H that stretched far deeper than the broken bone. When my mother-in-law arrived, I nearly cried from relief. She was hurried and a little brusque, but she cared. She saw I was struggling and didn't brush it aside. She helped me into the car gently, asked if I needed anything, told me she would make sure my husband picked up my prescription. That simple act, being seen, being worried about, felt almost foreign after the endless hours of invisibility. As we drove home, I leaned my head against the window, blinking back tears. I didn't want to admit it out loud, but it kept pounding through my mind with every mile. If he couldn't show up for me when I was broken, when would he ever? When we pulled into the driveway, part of me still held on to hope. Small and battered, but there. I told myself he must have just been overwhelmed earlier. Maybe once I was home, once he saw me struggling to walk, once he realized the weight of it all, he would step up. I needed that to be true. I needed to believe that the person I built a life with would catch me when I was falling. My mother-in-law helped me into the house, her hand steady on my elbow, her voice firm as she gave my husband clear instructions. Get her a heat pack ready. Pick up her painkillers from the pharmacy. Help her settle in. He nodded, mumbled something I couldn't hear, and wandered off toward the kitchen. I lowered myself painfully onto the couch and exhaled. Every movement felt like fire, sharp, burning, unrelenting. I tried to breathe through it, tried not to cry in front of the kids, who were hovering nearby with wide, worried eyes. I smiled weakly at them, trying to show them everything was okay, even as my body screamed the opposite. After a while, I went to lay with my son as he fell asleep. He clung to me, small and warm and trusting. And even through the pain, even through the exhaustion, I stayed. Because that's what love looks like. Showing up, even when you're broken, especially then. When he finally drifted off, I forced myself up and returned to the main part of the house. That's when I saw him, standing in the kitchen, casually eating. I stood there blinking, waiting for something, a word, a gesture, anything. Instead, he just looked up, shrugged, and kept chewing. I swallowed hard. Did you pick up the painkillers? He shook his head. No. Did you get the heat pack ready? I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. No. The words hit me harder than the stares had. I asked him, quietly, trying to hold myself together, if he could please get me something to eat. I hadn't eaten since midday, and every moment upright was agony. He made a plate, set it down without a word, and went back to his own meal. I ate what I could, lying on my side. Feeling the loneliness seep deeper into my bones than the fracture ever could. An hour passed. I asked again about the painkillers. He looked irritated, like I was nagging him. What exactly do you want to know about them? He said. I stared at him, stunned. Everything, he added, exasperated. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just about the painkillers. It wasn't just about the heat pack. It was about the fact that I was sitting there, broken and begging for basic kindness from the person who was supposed to love me most. It was about realizing that even my suffering wasn't enough to stir compassion in him. When I said I was hurt by how little he seemed to care, he rolled his eyes and said, "Here we go." When I called him an asshole, because honestly, what else could I call someone acting this way, he bristled and threw it back at me, saying that my communication was the real problem. As if my fractured spine, my hunger, my tears, my desperate asks for help were nothing compared to the crime of hurting his feelings. I didn't expect perfection. I didn't expect grand gestures. But I did expect, at the very least, compassion, decency, love. And standing there in my own kitchen, broken and unseen, I realized with devastating clarity, I wasn't going to get it. There's a particular kind of pain that comes not from your body breaking, but from your heart realizing you have to ask. Pled. Even for the bare minimum of care. Lying there, struggling to get comfortable without putting pressure on my fractured spine, I felt a wave of something worse than physical pain. It was humiliation. Not the kind that comes from public embarrassment, but the quiet, gut-wrenching kind that comes when you realize that you have to beg to matter. I had to ask him to get my food. I had to ask him to check on my medication. I had to ask him to even acknowledge that something serious had happened to me. Every request felt heavier than the last. Each time I opened my mouth to ask for something, I felt smaller, like I was slowly disappearing piece by piece, right in front of the man who had vowed to love me, sickness and in health. I didn't want to be needy. I didn't want to be demanding. I didn't want to be the nagging wife he would roll his eyes at and complain about later. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone to look at me, to see me, really see me. You're hurting. Let me help. Instead, every simple need I expressed became a negotiation, a burden, an inconvenience. When he finally shoved the food in front of me and sat back down to his meal without a second glance, something hollow opened up inside my chest. I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a broken spine. I was dealing with a broken kind of love. A love that only functions when it's easy. A love that falls silent when real work, real patience, real compassion is needed. It hurt more than I could explain. More than any bruise or fracture. Because when you're in agony, when you can barely stand or sit without waves of pain ripping through you, what you crave most isn't just medicine or rest. You crave gentleness. You crave tenderness. You crave someone who reaches for you before you even have to ask. Instead, I was left to piece together my own care with broken hands. Metaphorically and literally, while he sat a few feet away, somehow seeing none of it. When he accused me of being hard to be kind to. Because I called him an asshole after hours of being ignored, it was like another slap to the face. As if his kindness was conditional. As if my pain needed to be perfectly packaged in silence and gratitude before it deserved recognition. Love isn't supposed to work that way. True kindness doesn't need to be asked for. True care doesn't demand that you swallow your anger, your hurt, your exhaustion, just to make it easier for someone else to feel like a good person. I didn't call him an asshole because I wanted to hurt him. I called him an asshole because, in that moment, he was being one thoughtless, cruel, and utterly absent. And as I lay there that night, my body aching, my heart even more so, a brutal truth took root inside me. I shouldn't have to beg for help. Not from the person who promised to stand beside me. Not from anyone. The fact that I had to ask, plead, remind, insist, was its own kind of answer. And it was a truth I couldn't unsee, no matter how badly I wished I could. By the time the argument started, it wasn't even about the painkillers anymore. It wasn't about the heat pack. It wasn't even about the food. It was about something deeper. It was about the heavy silence, the invisible weight I had been carrying since I got home. It was about standing there, broken and bruised, and realizing I was more alone with him than I had been in that hospital waiting room full of strangers. When I finally spoke, when I finally said, "I'm hurt you haven't shown any care for me tonight," I wasn't expecting a dramatic apology. I wasn't expecting him to fall at my feet. But I wasn't expecting what came next either. "Here we go," he muttered, rolling his eyes like I was bringing up old, tired complaints. I blinked at him, stunned, feeling the sting behind my eyes again. Not because I was surprised at the words, but because I was still, somehow, surprised by how easily he dismissed my hurt. When I pressed him, when I told him that it shouldn't take a list of instructions for him to care for me when I was injured. He crossed his arms and said, "Make it impossible for me to be kind when you act like this. Broken. Tired. Desking. Begging for basic help." It was my tone, he said. It was the way I attacked him by calling him an asshole. It was my communication that made it so difficult for him to do simple acts of kindness. Brick walls. That's what it felt like talking to him. Throwing out desperate words, hoping something would break through, only to watch them bounce back unchanged, unanswered. "You're talking to a brick wall," he said at one point, frustrated. He thought he was talking about me. But the truth was he was the wall. He was the one I couldn't get through to. No amount of calm explanations, no amount of crying, no amount of spelling out my needs in the simplest words could make him see me. He wasn't hearing me. He was only hearing the inconvenience of being asked to care. He wasn't seeing me. He was only seeing his own discomfort. And that's the thing about brick walls: they don't absorb. They don't adapt. They just stand there, unmoving, unfeeling, blocking whatever is thrown at them. At some point during the argument, as his voice got louder and mine got quieter, I realized something. I wasn't fighting for an apology. I wasn't fighting to be right. I was fighting to be seen. And I was losing. Because he wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to win. When he finally stormed off to another room, muttering under his breath, I sat there exhausted in every possible way. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. I looked down at my broken body, my bruised heart, and asked myself, how did I get here? How did I get to a place where being loved meant being invisible? Where pain had to be translated, repackaged, and softened before it could even be acknowledged? I didn't have the answer that night. But deep inside, I knew this something had to change. Or I had to, because I couldn't keep reaching for someone who only saw my needs as an attack. I couldn't keep begging for care from someone who only felt burdened by it. Not anymore. The house was quiet after the argument, that thick, heavy kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, only distance. He had disappeared into another room, no doubt convincing himself that he was the one wrong, that I was overacting, dramatic, impossible. And me? I sat there, surrounded by crumbs of what I once thought was partnership, feeling more isolated than I had even in the emergency room. I replayed it all in my head, again and again. Not just the night, but everything leading up to it. All the little ways I had justified his silences. All the times I had brushed off the absence of kindness as stress or distraction or just how he is. But tonight there was no distraction. No misunderstanding, it was clear, painfully, blindingly clear. It shouldn't take instructions to care for someone you love. It shouldn't require a checklist or a step-by-step manual. You shouldn't have to spell out, "Please pick up the medicine I need to survive the night. Please prepare a simple heat pack so I can lie down without screaming in pain. Please notice that I haven't eaten all day," and not me asking 3 times. Love isn't supposed to be a transaction. It isn't supposed to be conditional on whether or not the request is polite enough, patient enough, convenient enough. Real love notices. Real love moves before it's asked. Real love doesn't wait for a breakdown to finally step in. And maybe that was the deepest hurt of all, realizing that my husband didn't lack the ability to care. He lacked the willingness. Because when his mother spoke, when she told him clearly and directly what to do, he nodded along, no resistance, no arguments. But when it came to me, when it came to the woman he vowed to love in sickness and in health, suddenly I was a brick wall. Suddenly I was making it hard for him to be kind. The message couldn't have been clearer. He would listen to authority. He would listen to obligation. But he would not listen to my pain. It wasn't about whether he knew what to do. It was about whether he thought I was worth doing it for without being forced. And in the quiet that followed our argument, that truth sat heavy on my chest, stealing my breath more painfully than any fracture. For years, I had told myself that love meant patience, that it meant understanding flaws, forgiving shortcomings, picking up the slack when your partner stumbled. And that's true to a point. But patience should not be a bottomless well. Forgiveness should not be blind acceptance. Understanding should not mean erasing yourself to make someone else comfortable. There comes a moment, a breaking point, where you realize that if you have to beg for love, it's not love. If you have to script basic compassion word for word, it's not partnership, it's performance. And no matter how much history you share, no matter how many promises were made, if the person you love looks at your pain and feels inconvenienced instead of moved, that is not someone you can build a future with. I didn't need him to be perfect. I didn't need him to read my mind. I just needed him to care enough to try. And as I lay there that night, back aching, heartbreaking, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I realized he couldn't even do that. Lying awake that night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I thought a lot about kindness, about how small it is, and yet how much it matters. When people talk about love, they talk about the big things. The wedding vows, the anniversaries, the promises whispered late at night, the dramatic gestures, the declarations. But love isn't built in grand moments. It's built in the quiet, unseen ones. The moments where no one else is watching. Moments like this one, when a broken woman came home from the hospital and just needed her husband to care. Kindness is the thread that holds everything else together. Without it, love unravels into something hollow. Something that looks real from the outside but feels brittle and sharp when you lean on it. I wasn't asking for the impossible. I wasn't expecting him to fix me. I didn't need a parade or a song or endless fawning. I needed what any person deserves: a warm meal placed in front of me without asking twice. A heat pack tucked against my back with quiet hands. A trip to the pharmacy to pick up the painkillers that would let me sleep through the night. I needed to feel like I mattered, not just when things were good, when laughter was easy, when I was able-bodied and doing everything myself. But now, broken, human. Kindness isn't complicated, it's noticing. It's choosing to move towards someone's pain instead of backing away from it. It's offering softness instead of excuses. It's hearing a cry for help even when it's whispered through exhaustion and frustration. And more than that, kindness is supposed to be reflexive, not earned. Not begged for, not withheld until the tone is right or the mood is perfect. True love doesn't make you audition for compassion. Sitting there with my fractured body and fractured heart, I realized something devastating. What we had might have looked like love. It might have sounded like love. But without kindness, without the simple, everyday acts of care that say, I see you, I choose you even when it's hard. It wasn't love at all. It was convenience. It was routine. It was something I had mistaken for real partnership because I wanted so badly to believe it was enough. But love without compassion is like a house without a foundation. It stands for a while, maybe even years. But the first real storm, the first real need, reveals the cracks. And if there's no kindness there to hold it together, it crumbles. That night, kindness wasn't there. Not in his hands, not in his words, not in the silence that stretched between us. And without it, there was no hiding from the truth. I wasn't just dealing with a broken bone. I was dealing with a broken relationship, one that could no longer be patched over with pretty words or empty promises. Because when it mattered most, when it was hardest, when it cost something to care, he chose not to. And once you see that, once you feel the full, shattering weight of it, you can never unsee it again. The next morning, the pain was still there. Sharp, unrelenting. But it wasn't just physical anymore. It had sunk deeper into a part of me I couldn't reach with heat packs or painkillers. It was the ache of knowing that the person lying just a few feet away from me in bed wasn't really with me anymore. Maybe he hadn't been for a long time. Maybe I was just finally hurting badly enough to see it. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, moving slowly because of my injury, feeling the full weight of it all. The conversations we didn't have, the silences that stretched longer and longer, the ways I had convinced myself that asking for more would be too much, that needing more would somehow make me difficult or ungrateful. But now, in the cold light of morning, I realized something simple and profound: expecting basic care isn't too much. It's not too much to expect your partner to pick up your medication when you can't move without gasping in pain. It's not too much to expect a hot meal after sitting in a hospital for 8 hours with nothing but anxiety and fear. It's not too much to expect compassion without having to beg for it or phrase it perfectly to avoid hurting someone's ego. The bar wasn't high, it was at ground level, and still, he stumbled over it. Choosing self-respect didn't feel grand or dramatic, it felt quiet, heavy, necessary. It felt like sitting there and asking myself hard questions. If this is how he treats you when you're broken, what happens when life gets even harder? If basic decency feels like an inconvenience to him, what will happen when it's not just one fall but the long wear and tear of real life? Is this the person you trust with your future pain, your future vulnerabilities? And as much as it hurt, I already knew the answers. Self-respect isn't about being proud. It's not about refusing to forgive small mistakes. It's about recognizing when someone shows you, not with their words, but with their actions, that they are unwilling or unable to meet you with the bare minimum. And it's about having the courage to believe you deserve better. Even if it means walking away from something you once held dear. Even if it means being alone for a while. Even if it means grieving the future you thought you were building together. Because at the end of the day, I realized something even more important. I would rather heal alone than be hurt alongside someone who sees my pain as a burden. I would rather fight through the hard days by myself than constantly explain, justify, or beg for the kind of care that should have been offered freely and instinctively. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't slam doors or scream in anger. It just quietly finally says, enough waiting, enough hoping, enough believing that love without kindness is still love. It isn't. It never was. And now, standing at the fragile beginning of healing, both in body and heart, I finally understood that expecting basic care, basic kindness, basic compassion isn't asking too much. It's asking for what should have been given without question. And I deserved it all along. When I look back on that night, the fall, the hospital, the arguments, the coldness, what strikes me most isn't the pain in my back. It's the realization that broke my heart far worse than the fracture ever could. You shouldn't have to beg for love. Love isn't supposed to be earned by suffering silently. It isn't supposed to be rationed out when your tone is perfect or your patience infinite. Love, real love, sees your brokenness and steps closer, not away. It shows up without being asked. It carries some of the weight when you can't. If you find yourself pleading for basic care, begging for attention, swallowing your needs just to make someone else comfortable, that isn't love. It's survival inside a relationship that has already stopped seeing you as a human being who deserves softness. And you deserve better. We all do. You deserve to be loved when you're strong and when you're struggling. When you're radiant and when you're ruined. When you're able to give back. And when all you can do is lie there and receive. You deserve a partner who doesn't have to be told how to care for you. Who sees you hurting and doesn't argue about whether your pain is convenient. And if someone can't meet you there, if their pride or their comfort matters more than your well-being, then choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. It's dignity, it's love, for the one person who has always needed it most, you. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever realized you were begging for the bare minimum? How did you find the courage to say, enough? Let's keep creating a community where compassion isn't optional and self-respect is celebrated. Subscribe for more real stories of healing, strength, and choosing yourself always. Because love without kindness isn't love, and you were never asking for too much.